Good morning.
Good morning. What are my listeners to take? We hear that the Prime Minister addressed the 1922 committee and says we must unite or die, and then hours later a key minister in the very vanguard of a very important piece of legislation quits. If the Prime Minister can't keep the party together, how can he keep the country together? Good morning.
Yeah, I mean, the controversial piece of this, Nick, and I don't actually see it as controversial, is that we want to be able to protect our borders. We want to make choices about who comes into our country, and so we are introducing the strongest piece of legislation to stop illegal migration into our country this country has ever seen. Mm-hmm. And it is, as you probably saw from the reaction in the Commons last night, it is ever so important and ever so perceived to be controversial. I don't believe it is controversial because all it is doing...
I'm talking about, respectfully, Secretary of State. I'm asking about the Prime Minister's authority. It's in shreds.
No, it's not. Absolutely
so
not. He is doing exactly what he...
Excuse me, sir. He tells the party unite or die, and within hours a key minister quits.
Yeah, and I'm really sad that Robert chose to go. In the Prime Minister's letter to Robert, the Prime Minister outlined actually why. And Robert has helped design this policy, and this policy is unbelievably strong because under this legislation, you're no longer, if you've come to this country illegally, be able to frustrate your removal by making an asylum claim, which is 90% of people so far, by using protections afforded under the Modern Slavery Act, which was actually 63% of people on that first Rwandan flight that essentially didn't go. Right. By making spurious human rights claims. And so you're getting to a vanishingly small number of reasons that you can stop your removal, which are based in law. And actually, this is the strongest package of measures that a government has ever brought through.
We're debating, Mr. Heaton, because the developments overnight, of course, have moved this to another area. I've got Conservative Party members from Sevenoaks in Kent to Richmond, their constituency far closer to Rishi than it is to the River Thames, saying that they believe this is the moment that the Tories have completely lost control. Tell them why they're wrong.
Because we're actually going to do what we've been trying to do over a long period of time. Rishi set 5 priorities. He's helpfully managed to achieve one. We're on course for others, but we want to stop the boats and make sure that we do that. Now, we've been frustrated both in votes in Parliament by the Labour Party and indeed by a Supreme Court judgment. We have now signed a treaty with Rwanda and indeed introduced this bill, which... in simple terms, we demonstrate that Rwanda is a safe country to remove people to, and the point behind what you're trying to say is, politicians need to deliver on what they say to the British people. But the British people are frustrated when they see boats still coming across, and this is a package of measures that we truly believe will stop that.
Mr. Heaton-Harris, my listeners are frustrated that on a Tuesday the government puts out a minister talking up a great policy that 24 hours later he decides to quit over. Some of you would appear so bent you can't even lie straight in bed when it comes to the truth.
Well, forgive me for rather disagreeing with you entirely on that and your characterisation of both Robert in that particular case.
But we never know what to take. On a Tuesday he loves the policy, he's selling it to the nation. On a Wednesday he's decided he quits.
But I'm afraid, I think that's an unfair characterisation of Robert, and actually you'll have to ask him questions about that process. In the Prime Minister's letter to Robert, the Prime Minister was obviously a bit surprised that Robert took this course of action because we believe, and I truly believe it is the strongest bunch of measures we've ever taken.
That's not actually what we're debating. Do you think that the party faces oblivion as a former Home Secretary? And goodness knows they could form their own club now, as a former Home Secretary said yesterday.
Actually, I don't. But you wouldn't be surprised to hear me say that. But what I do think is that if mainstream politicians cannot start talking sensibly about issues like this, and indeed try and deliver policies on issues like this, then what we've seen across Europe already. and indeed this debate is also going on in America and a whole host of other places, the debate gets represented by more extreme elements that no one would like to see in charge of our country. So we are taking sensible, pragmatic steps that deliver on a policy that will stop these votes.
How likely do you think it is the Prime Minister might face a confidence vote, Secretary of State?
I think it's highly unlikely, very unlikely. I'd say vanishingly small.
With your important role as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, many of my listeners are talking about how vital the ECHR is in that degree. Can you briefly explain why many do see this staying in the ECHR as so important in your brief as Northern Ireland Secretary?
Yeah, so it's an element. Well, it's not an element. So the ECHR is essentially almost one of the foundations of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, the agreement that brought peace to Northern Ireland. We had 25 years of peace after 30 years of troubles. And it's actually, there are three strands to the agreement. It's heavily in the first strand, which are the institutions of Stormont, which aren't running at the moment, and it's the bit that gives both communities, the nationalist and the unionist communities, essentially equal say in decisions that are taken forward. It was fundamental, the principle to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement at the time, and is why actually it's a really strong part of the agreement to this day.
Last couple of questions, reminding listeners, you won't need reminding, you were Chief Whip under Boris Johnson, so you're used to fighting fires. How badly damaged is Mr Sunak's discipline and authority here?
So generally, Nick, I don't think it's as big a story as is being made. It is.
Well, six
it's always.
Let
me explain, because I'm really sad that Robert has chosen to resign. He was an excellent minister, and as you say, was behind this policy and knows all about it. He's a loss to our
policy, which you
front
didn't
bench,
believe, but do go on.
Without a shadow of a doubt. But what is fundamentally important is actually the policy itself, because we do want to stop the boats. We had court judgments against us.
You're smarter than that. It's delivery and how a party looks, isn't it? And this, even you, and I accept that you're a loyalist, and indeed that is to your credit in some senses, even you admit this is a bad look for the Conservatives right now, with a key minister
I don't like
quitting.
I generally don't like anybody resigning from my party, but just to remind you, Nick, that when I was Boris's chief whip, pretty much everybody did. So, maybe I have a sense of scale and proportion.
Day at the office.
Yeah, maybe I have a sense of scale and proportion that others don't have.
All right. I'm grateful for your time.